Steph Curry is one of the greatest players of all time and has collected his fair share of accolades. Four-time NBA champion, all-time three-point leader, a finals MVP, and a two-time NBA MVP, and the only unanimous MVP in NBA history. Throughout his long career, Steph has gone to battle with great teams and for the most part came out on top. But today we'll review the biggest victims of Steph Curry and what happened to the franchises after he demoralized them. Steph's early career was centered around his ankle injuries and whether he could overcome these injuries and become an NBA star. Things were rough for the Warriors in those days, but Steph would still have significant playoff moments, flashes of the superstar he would become. In 2013, the Warriors faced off against the Denver Nuggets, marking Steph's playoff debut. A veteran playoff team as the third seed in the West, going against this inexperienced Warriors squad. The Nuggets were the clear favorites in this series and were poised to make a deep playoff run. But Steph had something to say about that. Going into Game 4, the Warriors were up 2-1 in the series with a chance to put the series out of reach with a 3-1 lead. Steph exploded for his first superstar playoff moment. The third quarter was where Steph would announce himself to the world, going off for 22 points and shooting 5 for 8 from 3, blowing the Nuggets out of the water and taking a 3-1 lead, which would eventually lead to the Warriors winning in 6. This was the fourth consecutive first-round exit under George Karl for the Denver Nuggets, and they had enough. After the season ended, the franchise cleared house, firing George Karl and entering a rebuild by trading star Andre Iguodala to the Warriors. The Nuggets would go on to miss the playoffs for the next 5 seasons, and that original roster was blown up. The Nuggets were sent back into purgatory, but as a consolation prize, they were able to draft Nikola Jokic in 2014, and you know how that eventually played out for them. But Steph ended this iteration of the Denver Nuggets and was on track to end another team's core in 2015. The Warriors would go into battle with the Memphis Grizzlies, who had a core of Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, and Zach Randolph, along with one of the best defenders on the planet, Tony Allen, who gave Steph hell in the first 3 games of the series. The physicality the Grizzlies played with was far too much for this young Warriors team. The Warriors were down 2-1 on the road in Memphis, facing down the barrel of a 3-1 deficit. But Steph said enough is enough and walked the Grizzlies down, with a 33-point masterclass, scoring on all 3 levels, breaking the Grizzlies' backs. He figured it out and led his team to 3 straight wins in the series with a superstar performance in a closeout Game 6, scoring 32 points with a full court heave at the end of the third quarter to completely rip the hearts out of the Grizzlies, silencing the entire crowd with his 62-foot shot, ripping away any momentum the Grizzlies thought they had, and ending their season in 6 games. After this series, the Grizzlies would fail to make the second round of the playoffs until 2022, which we'll get to later. Their core 3 were no longer able to raise the team past the 7th seed in the West, and they were eventually broken up in favor of a full rebuild as the core aged out of its potential contender window. They had a chance up 2-1 in the series to win and make a conference finals, but instead, Steph ripped their hearts out and they were never the same. Speaking of franchises that would never be the same after running into Steph, the Houston Rockets, a franchise that has been eliminated by the Warriors 5 times over the last 11 years, Steph has become the owner of the Houston Rockets, and it started in 2015 with the first iteration of the Rockets of James Harden and Dwight Howard. It was the Western Conference Finals, an opportunity to go to the finals on the line, and Steph was not going to be stopped. He averaged 31 points per game, 5 assists, and shot 49% from 3, easily handling the Rockets in 5 games to make his first NBA Finals and eventually win it. Unfortunately for the Rockets, this story doesn't end here. This is only the beginning of their misery, as the following year they had to face the Warriors again. Steph was injured, so there isn't much to discuss for this year on Steph's end, only the fact that the Rockets got smoked in 5 games and were eliminated in the first round after a conference finals appearance the previous year. The Rockets would blow the team up as their main 2 stars lost respect for each other. They fired Kevin McHale and hired Mike D'Antoni, retooling the roster around Harden and eventually trading for Chris Paul in 2017, building a well-balanced team around 2 stars playing an all-or-nothing style of basketball, dedicated to shooting 3s. The story between Steph and the Rockets doesn't end here, so we'll get back to the second iteration of the Rockets a little bit later. But now let's focus on one of the best comebacks in Western Conference playoff history. The Thunder, headed by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, faced off against the 73-9 Juggernaut Warriors and kicked their ass for the first 4 games of the series, going up 3-1. It looked as though the Warriors were dead in the water. The end of their season was here, but something happened. The choking gods possessed the Thunder, and the Warriors had an all-time lock-in moment. We all know how integral Game 6 Clay was for this comeback in the series, but Steph's numbers over the final 3 wins in the series are unreal. He averaged 32 points, 7 rebounds, 7.7 assists, and shot 47% from 3. He was the best player on the court, walking the Thunder down game by game to the ultimate Game 7. He scored 36 points with 24 points in the second half, taking the life from the Thunder, dancing on them in the final moments to put an exclamation point on the game, ending their season. Because of this series, the Thunder would end up losing Kevin Durant in free agency to the Warriors, leaving Westbrook all alone. The Thunder would lose in the first round for the next 4 years, stuck in mediocrity. Sam Presti realized they couldn't win with Russ, and it was time to blow it up. In 2019, they would trade Russ to the Rockets, officially ending the team that made the conference finals and was one game away from returning to the finals with a chance to beat the Cavs. But instead, they fell to the hands of Steph Curry, the demon that wouldn't allow the West to be won by anyone else.
There's the buzzer. There's a new dynasty in the NBA. The Golden State Warriors champions once again, back-to-back titles, 3 in 4 years.
We enter the era of the Dynasty Warriors, headed by Steph and Kevin Durant, a roster constructed with the intention of never losing again, and the biggest victim to Steph's super squad are the Trailblazers. In Steph's career, he is 10-0 against the Trailblazers in the playoffs. I mean, Steph was putting belt to ass whenever he saw Dame and CJ. He was like a bull seeing red. Didn't even give them a single game throughout the 3 whole series played. And it all started in 2016 when he returned from injury in Game 4. It was a tight game that was pushed to overtime by a clutch 3 from Harrison Barnes. And that's where Steph decided this series was over. Steph would set an NBA record for the most points in an overtime period in playoff history with 17, raining threes down from the heavens to announce his comeback to the NBA. It's one of the greatest 5-minute stretches of his entire career, destroying the Blazers' hope. Later down the line, the Warriors would see their old friend again in the first round of the 2017 playoffs, and it wasn't even a competition. Steph averaged 29 points per game, 8 more points per game than the second closest Warrior. He led them to a clean and easy sweep, making his record 6-0 versus Dame and the Blazers. But the most impressive series was 2019, with the Warriors down on their luck with an injury to Kevin Durant, leaving the old Big Three to fend off this explosive Blazers team that had made the Western Conference Finals, and were poised to make a run at this injured Warrior squad. But Steph wouldn't let them have any hope. The Blazers had a significant lead in the majority of the games in this series. In each of these games, they had over a 90% win probability and lost. The Grim Reaper Steph Curry destroyed this team, averaging 36 points per game, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and a true shooting percentage of 66%. His 146 points were the most by any player in a 4-game sweep in the NBA playoffs. He ripped out their soul, stealing game after game until the sweep was complete and they were on to the NBA Finals. And Steph would be a perfect 10-0 versus this Blazers team. The Blazers would be unable to replicate the success again in the future, failing to make it out of the first round in consecutive seasons. They had missed the playoffs in 2021 and have yet to return, living in the NBA draft lottery. They would trade away CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard, blowing up their core, officially ending the era of the Blazers haunted by Steph Curry. Speaking of being haunted by Steph Curry, our old friend the Rockets are back and more ready than ever to have their dreams crushed by Steph. But this time, the Rockets were coming back much stronger with Chris Paul on the team. He and Harden led the Rockets to the number 1 seed in the West and 65 wins. They were built to be the Warrior Killers. Daryl Morey explicitly constructed this roster with the idea of countering the Warriors, especially Steph Curry. But you can't counter greatness. Steph struggled early in this series, but locked in when it mattered most. With the Warriors down 3-2 in the series, 1 game away from elimination, they dominated Game 6 with a classic Splash Bros performance, scoring a combined 64 points, forcing a Game 7 in Houston. Houston proceeded to drop the biggest choke job in a single game we've ever seen, missing 27 straight threes, ending their season. The Rockets completely collapsed as Steph averaged 28 points per game over the final 3 games of the series, showing up to shut down the Rockets. When you go at the king, you better not miss, and they missed 27 times in a row. Unfortunately for the Rockets, they had to play Steph Curry again the very next year in the second round of the 2019 playoffs. But this was supposed to be the year they would finally topple this dynasty. Kevin Durant hurt his calf at the end of Game 5, in which the Warriors ended up winning, but he was going to miss the rest of the series. Harden and the Rockets were healthy, and it was their time to beat Steph Curry, who would be without his co-superstar. The Rockets had a Game 6 at home to push the series to 7 and potentially knock out the Warriors. But things don't always go to plan. In the first half of this game, Steph was horrific. He had 0 points and was 0 for 5 from the field. The whole world was doubting Steph Curry, slandering him for his horrific half, and he read all the comments at half and came out on fire. He would go on to score 33 points in the second half and 23 points in the fourth quarter, scoring 14 points in the final 3 minutes of the game, dancing on PJ Tucker with a minute left in the game, hitting an impossible step-back 3 to push the lead to 5, and they never looked back, ending the Rockets' season in 6 games, destroying any hope that franchise had in defeating Steph Curry. The Rockets would once again blow it up, trading Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook, and it never worked, as they basically had PJ Tucker as their starting center. A couple of seasons later, they ended up trading Harden to the Brooklyn Nets, ending the Harden era in Houston, an era encapsulated by the failure to beat Steph Curry. The Rockets would go into a rebuilding phase, eventually building a playoff team in 2025, where they had to see their old friend again, but we'll get back to that later.
Y'all gonna sit on First Take. You and Dominique Foxworth are going to sit on First Take and say that Steph Curry will not be in the conversation for a championship in the next 4 years.
The Warriors went from the greatest team of all time to the worst. The Warriors from 2020 to 2022 were a disaster, as they suffered from Kevin Durant's departure, injuries to the remaining superstars, and ultimately ended up in the lottery and the play-in. Simply put, their time was up. They sucked, and the media wanted to rub it in. Many doubted Steph Curry would ever reach the NBA Finals again, that he would never win another NBA title for the remainder of his career, but Steph had other plans.
Make the right strides, take advantage of the summer, and don't want to see us next year.
The first big victim of this reinvigorated Warriors of 2022 would be the self-proclaimed next dynasty, the Memphis Grizzlies. These two teams had serious beef throughout the season, with constant digs coming from the Grizzlies camp, and without winning anything, claiming they were next up to knock off this old Warrior team. Steph keeps receipts, and when they met in the second round of the playoffs in 2022, he was ready to let them have it. In Game 1, the Warriors were up 1, and Ja Morant had a chance to hit the walk-off game winner, but instead, Steph would go on to make one of the best defensive plays of his career, knocking the ball away from Morant and ruining his shot attempt. As Morant and his teammates stand around the basket wallowing in their defeat, the psycho that is Steph Curry comes up to them and lets them know that this series is going to be a whole lot of fun. And that it was. In Game 3, Steph would have a whole lot of fun as the Warriors were down 7 in the fourth quarter when he entered the game, and he would go on to score 18 of his 32 points in the final 8 minutes of play, putting the Warriors up 3-1 and eventually ending the Grizzlies' fake dynasty in 6 games. Since 2022, the Grizzlies have yet to make it to the second round again. They fired their coach Taylor Jenkins, traded away Desmond Bane, one of their core 3 players, and then lost the majority of the depth they had in 2022. This is why you can't run around claiming you're the next big thing when you haven't done anything. The cracks are already starting to show. 5 games into the new NBA season, with Ja Morant calling out the coaching staff for his poor performance and lack of effort. The NBA changes fast, and the Grizzlies have fallen out of relevance very quickly at the hands of Curry. He doesn't take kindly to trash talk. The 2022 NBA Championship is the crown jewel amongst Steph's hardware. Steph led the Warriors back to the top, their first final since 2019, a chance to prove all his doubters wrong and win a ring post-Kevin Durant. But he'd have to do it as an underdog to the young and upcoming Celtics, led by Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. This series was decided in 1 game, the biggest game of Steph Curry's life. The Warriors were down 2-1 in Boston for Game 4, a chance to regain control in the series or go down 3-1, and inevitably lose. He needed to be great, and instead of just being great, he played the best game of his life. Steph would score 43 points with 10 rebounds, shooting 50% from 3. Whenever the Celtics went on a run, Steph would hit multiple big shots to shut them down. In the third quarter, the Warriors were down, and Steph consistently hit big threes to slowly drag them back into the game and eventually take the lead going into the fourth quarter. He would close the game out with multiple big shots to extend the lead. Steph came into TD Garden and took the soul from the Boston Celtics and their entire fan base. The Warriors would win the next 2 games, blowing out the Celtics in Game 6 as Steph was pointing at his ring finger, letting the world know he was back and to never doubt him again. 2022 haunts the Celtics. They were minutes away from adding another championship to their legendary franchise, but Steph snatched it away. Fortunately for the Celtics, they never went away. They realized they needed to load up on more talent, and in 2024, they traded for Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday, creating an insanely strong lineup that would win the 2024 NBA championship, claiming what they could have had in 2022. Steph didn't destroy the Celtics, but was a roadblock that delayed the success they would later have. This past season, Steph helped the Warriors return to the playoffs to face off against a very familiar foe in the Houston Rockets. The third iteration of the team that Steph has gone against is now a young, feisty team with depth, but is absent a legitimate guy to take them to the next level in the playoffs. They were the second seed in the West and were a top 3 defense in all of basketball, but none of that actually matters in the face of Steph Curry. When Curry's against the Rockets, he's not going to lose, even as a 7th seed. Steph would average 24 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, with a true shooting percentage of 63. With the weakest team Steph has ever had in years, he was still able to beat the Rockets in 7 games. It's sad at this point that Steph has owned this franchise for over a decade. And once again, after losing to Steph, the Rockets rushed out to make changes, adding Kevin Durant in a trade this past offseason, adding him to this stacked young team. They were forced to level up after facing defeat from their ultimate boogeyman, Steph Curry. A curse that will continue to haunt the history of the Rockets franchise forever. Thank you all for watching this video. It took me a while to make, so I hope you enjoyed it. This video was inspired by Dylan Does Basketball's The Victims of LeBron James. Go subscribe to him after watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you guys next time.